Yo, and welcome to the 190th episode of Lake of Rage, a Pokemon Trading Card Podcast. I'm your host, as always, Kevin Clementi, aka Mellow underscore Magikarp. I'm joined today by a very special temporary guest host. We have the 2011 World Champion David Cohen joining us. David, thank you so much for joining us. How are you doing today?
Hey, thank you. Glad to be here. I really appreciate you thinking of me and having me on the podcast. But yeah, I'm doing well. I hope you are doing well as well.
I'm having a great time. I'm on summer break. I am living my best life. Just for the listeners, it's been a while since we had an episode because I skipped NAIC, so I stopped caring about the standard format. But we went to Houston last weekend for the Beyonce concert. 10 out of 10, highly recommend. I don't know how many Beehive members listen to Pokemon podcasts, but if you do, it's a good tour. But anyway,
Yeah, that's cool. That's cool. I've kind of swore off concerts myself most of the time just because I have an early old man bedtime these days. But last night I went to a like a Japanese rock pop
mhm,
idol concert down in Tacoma near Seattle here, and her name is Otto, and she sang songs for like that One Piece movie that came out. So that's
yes,
kind of my like I let my little nerd side flourish a little bit and went down there, and that was a great time. So that's my one concert for the year. I'm done. Uh, you know,
that's sick. No, I love that. Anyway, people came here for Pokemon. As much as we could probably keep talking about music or whatever else, I want to talk to you. You are someone who we talked about this before the podcast. You have almost no presence in the Pokemon community because people are all on Twitter. You don't have a Twitter. And I feel like that makes us a little bit special because we can learn a lot more about someone who has one of the best finishes ever, right? You were one of a handful of people to be a world champion. So I want to know, when did you start playing the Pokemon trading card game?
yeah. So I started playing in 2007. So that was like Delta Species year basically, and so I was oh, 12, 11, something like that at the
Mhm.
time. So getting into the competitive scene at that time when Pokemon had kind of it had been up and down. I know you were talking with Ross recently on it, or not recently, but on that podcast, fresh in my mind that I listened to yesterday, he was talking about the Nintendo era, right?
Mhm.
So like when Ruby Sapphire came, that 2004 era, kind of going off of that, Pokemon still hadn't blown up yet. It was kind of in this wavy period of, you know, what's the kind of economy in Pokemon going to look like over the next few years in terms of popularity. So it was an interesting time to be kind of getting into it because it wasn't like everyone in the world was a huge Pokemon nut or anything like that.
Mhm.
So I just discovered it because a friend had wanted to play like at the league or whatever, and then you go to the league, you discover that you can pay $2 and play a tournament, and you win some packs, and then eventually you kind of learn because again, this stuff's just not on the internet, right? So like you don't know about these things until you go and see them and go to them locally,
Mhm.
and then we discovered there's an actual competitive circuit. You start going to events, you're a kid, you get blown out of the water because you're coming in with your deck that you put together from your 10 packs that you got at Target. You don't understand what the concept of like a real metagame is and stuff like that. So over the year, I don't know how I started. Like the first tournaments I went to, I was going 0-3 and 0 and
Mhm.
4. Somehow it clicked enough for me to want to keep doing it. I don't know how, but it did. And then eventually, by the end of that year of playing, I had at least like kind of come to understand what the competitive scene looks like just from getting thrashed by real decks and then being like, oh, how do I acquire these? How do I figure out how to build one of these real decks and go from there?
So when did you actually jump into the like big competitive, like going to, I'm going to say states were back then. Is that correct?
Yep.
Like,
Yep,
okay.
exactly. Yeah, it was the city circuit, which are like league cups, and then you had the states and regionals, which were I mean back then for even masters, they'd be the size of an SPE today. They were like 300, people. That was a big regional tournament.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, it was pretty quick actually because some of those had come around like right as I started playing because everything was seasonal back then. So it wasn't like regionals were throughout the year. It was you play in the city local tournaments during like winter break, and then you come around to like March time, and that was when they would have the states and the regionals. So I had somehow found the game during like the cities time. So by the time the states and regionals came around, I had discovered like the Pokegym forums, I discovered like kind of real deck lists in a way. So I
Hmm.
was able to just like copy one, and I bought my first like cards off eBay to make a Rye deck at the time, the Raichu Executor Delta deck, and so that took me to like top four at a regional tournament, in seniors. So
Hmm.
again, it was not that many people. It was like you play 4 or 5 rounds and then you're in top cut already. Um, but that I think that taste got me like propelled me from there, and got me to keep going and playing.
I was about to ask, what was your first competitive deck? So it sounds like Rye Eggs was the go-to. Now, because this is always a little bit of a nostalgia bait when you have someone on who played back then. I did not play, right? Rye Eggs was a spread deck, correct? Wasn't it one of the more like difficult decks to play, or was it kind of a format where everything was difficult?
Well, that's the thing. Yeah, if I don't go back and play retro games too much. Um, I don't know what it's like to have played like some of the more real meta decks because Ryax at the time was a deck that had been like a rogue deck at the previous nationals. So this is, a few sets since then,
Hmm.
from June all the way to March. So it wasn't like as relevant of a deck, but back then in the juniors and seniors, like if you just had a deck that had succeeded at some point, you were leagues ahead of like all the kids with theme decks and stuff. So
Hmm.
I think that's more what propelled me. And like I had seen, a couple of Pokemon write-ups that just kind of talked about like how to play the deck, I guess. So I
Hmm.
think that was like, and they were some of them were just kind of self-explanatory. It's like who knows if I was really playing it correctly, but at a certain point again, it's just like you have real cards, you have actual four copies of things that work synergistically, and you're playing against kids with, just random like pile of cards thrown together, like I had been just a few months prior. So
Yeah.
I don't think it was you know it wasn't too hard to be competitive in those younger divisions back then, just due to the lack of information, that was present for, and lack of funds even,
Hmm.
for kids to like have their parents buy them the card that they needed to make a real deck. That wasn't always a guarantee. Um, but yeah, it was a spread deck. Like I vaguely remember I think it was powerful because it just had the option between you're either spreading or you're just like hitting hard with the Executor, which had some way of just doing like straightforward damage, I think, for like how many bench you had or something.
Hmm.
So it was just like a little combination of simple attackers basically that just worked out decently well. Um,
Makes
but
sense.
yeah, it was fun. It was fun getting into the game during that time for sure.
So let's jump forward a little bit then to Masters. When did you like jump into Masters and were immediately like, yeah, this is serious. I'm going to keep going for it. Did it have a little bit of a learning curve going from seniors to Masters, where it sounds like at the time seniors really was beating a bunch of theme decks compared to I've heard Masters wasn't that far off, but also a little bit harder at the time.
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, even like because I was in seniors until 2009 when I got second at the seniors worlds.
Mhm.
So I had kind of like over those next 2.5 years, the brain development from 11 and a half, 12 to 14, almost 15 was pretty massive as well. So
Yeah.
like over those next two formats, I had grown a lot more competitive. Um, and so by the time I got to Masters, like that was just after I got second to Worlds, I aged up, the next tournament basically.
Mhm.
Um, and so I was already in a pretty good groove at that point. Like I was developing into a skilled player. So that first year in Masters, actually, if I remember correctly, I mean, at least at the local level, like I was very successful. Um, just because the format, the SP Pokemon, I had a really good run with at the time. So even though I had earned my invite already to the next Worlds from
Mhm.
getting the second place, I believe I still had a pretty good like season in Masters, and then that kind of prepped me for the following year. Um, but yeah, it was not. I did have a sort of lucky streak in the sense that so by the time I had got to second place in the seniors over
Mhm.
those 2008, 2009 years, we actually developed a really strong senior competitive kind of circuit. Like there were some other seniors who were really, really good, and a lot of them kind of stopped playing as they aged up. But at the same time, a lot of these Ross and Co, the X Files members, the people from Washington who were insanely good, they were actually just hitting like kind of college age because they were always kind of like 4 years ahead of me.
Mhm.
So they like a lot of them kind of stopped playing in the local circuits at the time that right as I aged up and got into it. So I and they would come back and and then we'd have, these great games and stuff, but I was able to sort of dominate the Masters, in a way just because I think I got a little bit lucky with timing with like how other players, had other things in their lives that, during these kind of poor success years of my original Masters career. So,
Hey, we
yeah.
take those.
Yeah,
Also,
exactly.
for anyone who's been a longtime listener, the term X Files probably sounds familiar. We've had Pablo Meza talk about it as well as Ross Cawthon. So, it's it was the original big team, quote unquote, although whether they call it a team depends on which member you ask, right? But yeah, it's you might have recognized that term before. The X Files was it's still, if you look at the name of the players, some of the best players that are still playing the game, such as Ross and Pablo and etc., right? But let's go ahead and jump into the big season, right? 2011. How did this one go? Because we talked a little bit before. This was not a normal season for anyone, not just you. Like, what was happening here leading into that World Championships?
Yeah, so I mean that was a pretty unique year all around. Just for me, I had these kind of like I said, I did pretty well in my first year in Masters, but by the time Worlds came around, because I had that auto invite, so this is 2010 now. I'm talking just go back a year. Um, I just my mind wasn't in it. Head wasn't in the game. Like I was just I was there because I earned the invite, and I was like, cool, it's great to be here. Didn't test as much as I should have. Did not do that well. So then 2011, that whole competitive season, I was like, okay, I got to lock in now. I got to earn the invite from for real in Masters this time. Like I can't just slack off. So I was definitely applying myself a lot that whole year, and then yeah, leading into the nationals, world's summertime, we had this like really broken combo of cards be printed. There it was basically a deck that could just like donk on turn one no matter what. It was just like it would do it every time. So unless you like were able to start multiple basics, you were done for.
Mhm.
And
And
Pokemon had to do an early rotation for the first time ever at that point. So they rotated prior to nationals, and so the card pool at that point was just incredibly small. So the whole nationals and worlds metagame in 2011 was pretty limited in terms of card selection, but that did lead to some obviously iconic deck choices.
yeah, when you look at the World Championships from that year, and we were again mentioned this a little bit before, there's really only that's not true. Three decks that you see in here. Obviously, there's Ross's weird creation, right? But you had the Magnezone Embor, which is the deck that you had played as well as some other people. There was Reshi Typhlosion, or Reshiflosion, I believe it was called, and Yanmega Magnezone as well. And that's really it. Did that small metagame kind of help you as you were heading into that World Championships?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I was, I didn't know it at the time, obviously, but uh, yeah. So for some historical reference, kind of how it worked was, yeah, you have this sort of rock paper scissors triangle of decks, and there really wasn't a lot of other choices at the time. But the Yanmega Magnezone deck had won the nationals that year, and that had a good matchup against the Magnezone Embor combination. And so people were pivoting to the Typhlosion Reshiram, which had a good matchup against the Onmega.
Mhm.
So by the time Worlds rolled around, everyone was playing the Reshiram Typhlosion so they could beat the Onmega decks. But the Reshiram Typhlosion then lost to the Embor Magnezone. So I had, and that's kind of the realization I had come to is I was testing these decks, and I was just thinking at the time like, man, I really hate playing all these decks. I hate the way that the kind of rock paper scissors nature of it is right now. um, the only one I enjoyed playing was the Reshiram, the Magnezone Embor, and I knew that I could reliably beat the Reshiram Typhlosion. And I basically just said to myself, I'm like, you know what? The Mega Magnezone might be the actual best deck, but I think people are going to play the Typhlosion because it'll have this good matchup, and I'm just going to have to bank on that. Like I'm just going to have to kind of roll the dice in that sense. And I mean that worked out. The kind of the picking a side of the metagame to be able to beat. That's a proven method time and time again. So I just look back at my like Worlds report from then, and I played 11 different decks over the course of the World Championship, and 7 of those were Reshiram Typhlosion. So it worked out pretty well.
I mean, we definitely take those ones, right? Can you, just for the sake of people who don't know, kind of myself included, I've read through the cards, but what was the Magnezone Embor deck actually doing?
Mhm. Yeah, yeah. So the Magnezone was kind of similar to a similar way to Goldengo in these days, but it would discard energies from across your board to do unlimited damage. So it was like 50 times the number of energy you discard.
Mhm.
So the Magnezone could one-shot anything, but you needed a way to attach energy. So that was where the Embor came in. But you also had the Magnezone was its own draw engine as well. It could draw your hand back at the 6. So that was it was just a powerful card. And then you had your own Reshurams to beat, you couldn't be discarding unlimited energy every single turn with the Magnezone. You had to put it in the lost zone with that. So you had the Reshiram as well. So you just, flip between your attackers, whichever you needed. You had the Reshiram, which did the 120, which the Typhlosion Reshiram deck was limited because they didn't have an ability to do infinite damage, right? They
Mhm.
were capped with their own Reshiram plus powers and things like that, which did 10 extra damage. Um, but the Magnezone Embor was the only deck that could do both. So you had like the kind of renewable Reshiram attack, loading the energies on it with the Embor, but then it also had the option to just blow up something big. So any of your opponent's bigger stage 2 Pokemon and things like that. So it was, and then it also the key difference was it had that Rayquaza Deoxys Legend double card, which was the only card at the time that had a extra prize effect. So it was like do 150 damage or something, and then you take an extra prize if you knock out a Pokemon with that attack. So that was, and no other deck could power that card up. So you needed the Embor in order to attach all your energy and do that attack. So it was a clunkier deck than some of these others, but you know, it had more options than any of the other decks in format for sure.
So this question, it might sound stupid, but I feel like it has to be asked. Rayquaza Deoxys Legend. So for those who don't know, the Legend cards were two separate cards you had to play down at the same time. This was a format without Ultra Ball, right? You couldn't just go out and search them. I mean, there were cards that searched them, but it was a little less easy, I think, maybe correct me if I'm wrong, than the current format of just, I'm going to grab whatever I want most of the time, right? You have access to your whole deck currently. And I mean, Twins was a card. Let's ignore that for the time being. It was maybe not as easy, right? Was this a card you actually were able to get out there consistently? Or was this a type of thing where you're like, oh, I can seal up a game if I get it?
No, and that's a good question. So we did have a card called Pokemon Communication at the time. So that was the Pokemon search of the time. Was like it's a trainer card, and you reveal a Pokemon, and you basically trading it into your deck. So you reveal a Pokemon, put that one into your deck, get another Pokemon. So you did have Pokemon search, but the Twins was the other powerful part of that because the Magnezone deck played the entire game behind. It was
Mhm.
like one of the OG, not one of the OG, but at the time it was the only like play from behind deck. So you planned to go behind, and then you play Twins all game, be able to get whatever cards you want because you knew that your opponent was just constantly doing this, one for one. Every Pokemon was worth one prize at a time except the Legends, but you only played that down on the final turn of the game anyway. So basically, like you generally were able to just because your deck would probably be so small by the end of the game because
Mhm.
these were long games because everything was a single prize Pokemon, so you're going through your whole deck by the time you're done. So it was pretty reliable to get it out. And it was the cornerstone of the deck because you were always playing from behind, so you needed a way to be able to take that your last two prizes when your opponent's at one. It almost always came down to that math, and there's just nothing your opponent can do because all they can do is keep KOing one prize Pokemon, and so
Mhm.
they can see the writing on the wall, and it's just a matter of time. But yeah, that's always how it's going to end.
Was this a format without Gust, or was your deck just the one without Gust?
There was a flip gust effect. It was Pokemon Reversal, so the Typhlosion Reshiram decks would play that, and some of the other ones would as well. So that was always a risk, but again, you only played the Rayquaza Deoxys Legend at least at the very end of the game. But throughout the game, every deck had to play with the idea of playing down. Like you always had to have a spare Magnemite, right, or a spare Tepig in case they are able to bring up your Embor and KO it because you need to be able to put the other one down the next turn. So you did
Mhm.
always have to either just kind of build up your board to have multiple versions of every stage two, or at least be able to replace it, if it goes down, similar to this format in a lot of ways.
Makes sense. Another question, going off the 2011 World specifically, is you were the world champion, right? You won, And yet, we have seen the most iconic deck from probably any world championship is the deck that you actually beat. How does that feel? How do you feel looking at like everyone talk about the truth and you're like, well, I beat that. Like, do you look at that and you're kind of like, y'all, it's not that great, or do you kind of like respect what Ross was able to put up there?
Yeah, yeah. And I love Ross. I mean, Ross is one of my favorite players in the game. Like we've played against each other. I mean, not an incredible amount of times because again, he kind of went off to college immediately as I aged up. But he would come back for some tournaments and we would get to play. So I'm actually dreaming now of when I can do well enough in like a regional to get paired against Ross again at one of these big events.
Yeah.
I think that'll be a magical time. But no, I love it because I think that format was again it was so limited that what Ross did was just incredibly impressive, and it's just a testament to how good Ross always is. Like that's not the only obviously rogue deck he's thought of. He's always pushing the boundaries and thinking of these crazy things and these crazy combos of cards. But to me, it really is. It kind of like defines our play styles. Like even in the decks that we tend to choose, I didn't think like hardly anything is more iconic to me than the incredibly complex like Ross style, lock deck, moving stuff around. And my style of play is just like I just play guys that can blow stuff up. I just play big guys. I love decks that just can like they're straightforward. They have enough tricks to
Mhm.
be able to do these like comebacks and stuff, but they're still straightforward. Like I don't play a lot of lock decks and things like that. So yeah, playing that style of matchup, I feel like just defines the playing styles of Ross and I as well. But no, I love it because again, it brings fame to me actually because like people, I didn't realize how many people would reminisce almost on 2011 World specifically. Like when I'm getting back into the kind of competitive circuit this year, and people would have not even played, or if some kids haven't weren't alive back then, and they would bring it up because they'd be like, "Oh, you beat the truth," like like you were. So it's like it works. It works. Gives fame for both of us. So I love it because I think it's like provided such an iconic memory to so many people about like what that World Championships was.
Mhm.
That like if I hadn't beat Ross with the incredible truth deck, I don't think people would think about 2011 Worlds that much. They'd be like, "Oh, that was like a small format. You only were playing like 7 rounds at a top 16. It was like one of the smallest worlds." People would probably just write it off. But instead, people are like, they remember that one more than some of the other years. So, no, I love it. I love it.
And I kind of want to go off of that finals as well. I've never watched it. I assume the footage exists somewhere. But I want to hear from your side, right? You were playing against this deck that I don't know how much you knew about it. Maybe you were already well aware of what was going on, maybe not. But you had been picking on Reshiflosions the whole day, it sounds like, right? Over half of your rounds were against Reshiram Typhlosion. And then again, the finals, you hit question mark deck. Like, did you know what you were getting into? Did you know how to approach the matchup? Was everything kind of on the fly? Like, how did that go?
Yeah, great question. It was so this is a testament to kind of like my skill level when I'm really familiar with the game
Mhm.
is I can adapt pretty quickly. And so reading the kind of bracket, your day two starts back then, it was just top 16. You look at your bracket. So I saw that like I could play Ross eventually. We were on opposite sides of the bracket, right? But I had no idea like really how he was progressing until I had finished with that top four match. And then you only have like 45 minutes and then you go right into the top two. It's not like today where they do it on a whole separate day.
Mhm.
So I was like, yeah, I was like, he's playing what? Like someone came up to me, they were telling me like my friends, like we have, a shared friend pool. So it was like, people just kind of knew what he was playing, were able to tell me, and I'm sure people were doing the same to him. And I was just like, I don't understand. Like, what do you, what does it do? So I was, yeah, coming up with this thing kind of thing on the fly. It's not like
Mhm.
anyone had a real good handbook for like how to beat that deck or anything ahead of time. So I just roughly knew it was in his deck by the time I was sitting across from him, and I had a rough idea of like, okay, I understand like what his deck's designed to do. It's designed around the fact that everything else in the format cannot continue to one shot his Pokemon, so he's able to move this damage around.
Mhm.
So I knew I was like, I just need to not put any damage on his board and just, mow through things one at a time. And I knew my deck was the only one that could do that. So at that point, it was just about like I mean, it was still a lot of luck because you had to get the right setup. Like it's still a lock deck. If he, locks me down before I'm able to get set up,
Mhm.
ain't nothing I can do about that. So That game one really defined the entire. So for reference, if people go back and watch, there is footage on it because the first kind of foray into streaming at the time was Kyle Sukovich and some other people were doing something called the Top Cut, and they were beginning to film unofficially the world's matchups. Like it was Pokemon helped it, but they weren't like doing it and putting it up on Pokemon YouTube. So it's still somewhere on YouTube. It is a fun time to watch because yeah, it's a wild sequence of games. But that game one was yeah defined it because I had to have the perfect setup before he could lock me, and then I had to have the perfect like resource management to continually like mow through his guys because he's still able to respond. It was not a this was not an auto win matchup at all. And I saw he had beat a Magnivore in the top 8 coming to me, so it's not like this was a terrible matchup. It was just probably the only matchup that had a chance. So you all better to be lucky than good, so they say. But it did the key thing from back then that people will see if they watch the footage is so I managed to win this game one, kind of this resource war. I know I'm going to lose the game two because I know that he's can choose to go first and he'll get his lockup before I can get anything going. So I'm just kind of taking my time. Back then, you could not ask a judge how much time there was. They didn't let you wear a watch, or at least not set a timer. So
Mhm.
you had no idea how much time was left in the game. So I was totally just doing it based off like vibes and just being like, okay, I know I need to concede so that I can choose to go, you had to go first, get my stuff set up, take an early prize lead, and then time would be called. Uh, I did not, I misjudged the time. So time is called while we are shuffling for the game two. I had conceded, been like, all right, I probably got 5 minutes left. We start shuffling, time is called. And apparently, what back then that meant you go into a sudden death, one prize, and you have to flip again for going first. So my whole strategy, this whole game, I'm like, okay, I'll be able to, choose to go first. It'll go great. I'll concede at the right time. I messed that up, but I won the flip, and that sealed the game. So, uh, yeah, that was again better be lucky than good.
I love that saying so much. So it sounds like a little bit of luck there, right? Like you think that the matchup's definitely one where going first makes a pretty big difference. Is it because you said you're a slow play from behind deck? Is the truth just a slower deck that you're able to get that first prize in sudden death type situation?
Exactly. Yeah, the truth didn't really have a good way of. They had a Dawn fan, which was kind of an aggressive stage one at the time, but it didn't do a ton of damage. So the truth just didn't have a great way of taking like a lot of early prize and like I could just blow through resources and take prizes if I want to by just
Mhm.
doing these Magnezone one shots. So as long as I got set up, I knew I could just like easily take prizes as long as I knew time was going to be called, etc. Um, and so yeah, getting that first prize definitely came down to the who went first because at the time, similar to today, it's like you need to have your guys in play for a turn, and then you could rare candy them the next turn after that. So you had to be the first person to evolve their Pokemon because he's immediately going to evolve into his Vileplume and shut off my rare candies, which the Vileplume shut off trainers or items. And so I had to go first. And so I was lucky enough to go first that very first game. And that's what allowed me to kind of establish my board before he did. And then that game three, kind of a similar thing.
Mhm.
Um, it also relied on me having the right cards. Like again, it's a clunky deck to set up. That's why you're waiting until your opponent KOs your little baby Cleffa, and then you can play twins and things like that. So I had to get the right sequence of cards because oftentimes with that deck, you'd spend the first 3 turns, the Cleffa, you'd shuffle your hand into your deck and get a new 7, unlike today's Cleffa. So I would be doing that every single turn because I'm just like, well, this hand sucks and do it again. This hand sucks, do it again. And like that deck was just so slow. So I mean that's another of its, it's a little bit inconsistent, but because you didn't mind if you went behind in prizes, it worked out fine. But against Ross, I knew that I had to kind of speed things up because if the moment he's able to get that Vileplume down, I'm in a world of hurt. So like I gotta get my guys set up before he does that, or else I'm just, totally cooked.
So after Worlds, right? You're on top of the world, world champion, all that good stuff. Did you continue with the game through all those years? Did you kind of do the thing of like, well, actually, I'm heading towards adulthood now. I'm just going to go ahead and leave this behind. Like, what actually happened after that Worlds?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So that's, what is it, almost 15 years ago, 14 years ago. So
Yeah.
I was when I won, I was going into my junior year, my 11th grade of high school year. So I still played pretty consistently that following year, but again, it was just like not, not locked in as much. So I had decent success in the like kind of local circuits. I might have like I have these random, pings of going to like a top four or top eight at a regional or anything like that. But by the time the next worlds had rolled around, or even that nationals, like I was definitely again just not locked in, like kind of just riding that high of having won, but just being like, oh, I can come play. I loved hanging out with my friends, loved the community, but did not test as much as I needed to. So that next worlds, I probably went like 2-5 or something. Like played some deck that was not good. I think I played a jump left deck at the time, which was just terrible.
Mhm.
Uh, and then the following year is the first year that I failed to kind of meaningfully earn my invite. So leading into the 2013 Worlds, because I just kind of like that was my senior year of high school, and I at that point, again, I still love the community. Most of my friends were from Pokemon, so I would still attend events, but I definitely let other life things kind of just impede my amount of commitment to the game. So yeah, by that Worlds, I was like trying to grind in just kind of casually, just be like, oh, I'll see if I can do that. Still attend Worlds and stuff. And then after that, when I went to college, that's when I really kind of dropped off for a few years. Again, always like kind of maintaining a connection and going to a few big events throughout the years. So even through like 2015, 16, 17, I again have these like I would usually attend more regional events than I would locals. So I'd go to these regional events and I would still like top eight, top four of some of these, but never a big win like I had in Worlds. Yeah, and then eventually kind of the last regional I had played was 2017, and I don't even remember it, but I have an order history on TCG Player for a Mega Gardevoir at the time and a Sylveon. I do not remember what these cards did. I had them in my binder, so I knew I had them. I must have played them.
Yeah.
No memory of that event. Do not remember it all. But that was, I know, the last regional event before kind of getting back into things this year.
Yeah, so we had talked before, and I'll give a shout out to, as I assume you're listening, Josh. Give a shout out to Josh, who was the one who kind of brought up, like, wait, why don't you have David on? Um, you are kind of back in the game, right? Maybe not that same level of, now you're an adult compared to a high schooler. It's harder to play when we're an adult, right? But you've kind of jumped back into the game. How have you been finding a transition back into like actually going to events and things like that again?
Yeah, I mean it's been a trip, man. Like it's been so I've attended a few kind of league cups throughout the year. Um, and then I played Vancouver regionals and Portland regionals, and then I had to skip nationals this year. But I mean, I would have been like mentally ready to just jump into nationals, but I had some other things to do.
Mhm.
So it's been wild. One of the biggest differences I've noticed um, is I actually love the wealth of information that's now present. So like back in when I was a senior, I remember paying a guy $20, mailed him a mailed him cash in an envelope for him to send me a deck list. And it was worth it. Like I got, I was in seniors and just having like a real deck list from like a
Mhm.
good player that got me like a second place at a state or a regional or something. So it was like totally worth it. But just that kind of concept nowadays, obviously all the lists are published.
Mhm.
The biggest thing you can do is actually just look through all of the kind of the big lists, after any big tournament finish, because that at the next tournament, people are going to be just playing those cards, and that's not a bad thing. It's awesome to see anyone getting into the game. The cards are cheap because
Mhm.
they smartly made the really expensive collectible cards just art variations. Like back then, sometimes they would print like a secret rare card that was playable, and you needed like four of them. It'd be impossible to do that. Like there was no way. But now the cards I want, I bought like a whole deck for $40 because I don't need the full arts. Like I'm just here to get the competitive cards. So I
Mhm.
love it. That's awesome. And then yeah, because of that wealth of information, like it doesn't actually eliminate the skill gap nearly as much as I thought it would, because maybe it's partly because the decks are so much more complex, I
Mhm.
feel, than they used to be. So the pathways you have to take in the games that are actually like there's more subtle misplays you can make than it used to be. It used to be like you could recover from a kind of subtle misplay, or the path to victory in certain matchups was just very straightforward.
Mhm.
Now it's like it is not straightforward. And I'm having a tough time kind of like getting the path set right in my brain, because you have to play so many matchups so differently. It's not like you have one deck that does a function, you just do the same function against every deck, and sometimes it's good, sometimes it's not. No, it's like your deck that can do all these different things has to play significantly differently against different decks. So I think that's created a new kind of skill gap
Mhm.
because you still see the same players do well, right? And so that proves that it's not like everyone's on the same playing field these days. So there is still like it clicks for some people and for some people it doesn't. And you still see that same kind of skill just uh, showing itself in different ways than it used to, but it's still the same like strategic minds, people who can, think creatively about how to play these matchups. And it's always been just a lot of memorization. And that's the part that I think I was good at and that I can still be good at is if someone tells me the path I need to take for a certain matchup,
Mhm.
I'm good. Like I'll be able to beat that matchup. My problem playing in these recent events is just not having dedicated enough time to learn like how I'm supposed to play the matchup. So I'm kind of stuck in this same mode of like, okay, I just kind of know how my deck's supposed to operate. I'll just go ahead and figure it out as I go. And that doesn't work anymore because if you're figuring it out as you go, you might have already lost that matchup and you can only have one loss. So both the tournaments so far I've lost my winning in like for the day two, but I've come so close each time that I'm like, I know I still got it in there. Like I can feel myself making these plays. It's just unfamiliarity because I'm generally grabbing a deck that I've never played the day before,
Mhm.
both times. So if I just play the decks a little bit more, learn from other people, learn from the other amazing players that are in the game right now, I think that's the way to go. And so the thing that I'm actually going to capitalize on that I think is worthwhile for any other player too is like the 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 sort of small business that players are able to make for themselves putting out this content. I
Mhm.
find some of that stuff incredibly valuable. So like for before Vancouver regionals, I paid for like Isaiah Bradner had a Goldengo guide and he listed like all the matchups in it. It was just like, it's like a PowerPoint they put together. And I listened through that and I was like, this is 100% worth the money. Like I used that and then boom, I was able to like go into these matchups and know kind of how it's supposed to play out.
Mhm.
And then I was just like a couple small things that I still did wrong that I just need a little more familiarity. But that got me like 80% of the way there without me even having to have, tested the deck. So I think players, should always leverage this ability that we have now to like learn from the best basically and learn what people have already put time into the game, develop these concepts, develop these strategies, take that, use that as a base of understanding, and then kind of like, go from there and respond to the metagame, etc. Um, yeah, I mean, long-winded way of saying like the format's incredibly complex compared to how it used to be, but the same skills still apply. And if you have those things and if you can like do that, same kind of stuff, you'll still succeed in the game today, which I think is cool to see.
So I've got a follow-up question for the current format and the current decks are maybe less forgiving and seemingly harder to play. I don't want to put words in your mouth because that's not exactly what you said. But
Mm.
when I look at a deck like your Magnezone Embor deck, right? I'm looking at something where, all right, I've got to sit behind a setup Pokemon. I've got multiple attackers who are rarely going to OHKO stuff. I know Magnezone can OHKO, but like it was a very two-shot heavy game, right? You have a card like Twins where you want to be behind so you can tutor out any two cards you want, and then you have to pick two specific cards. This seems like a format, all single prizers, very slow. You're playing from behind in this deck. Why do you think this current format is and maybe more complex or more decision heavy or stuff like that than something like this 2011 Worlds deck?
Yeah, yeah. And so this is where I'm actually curious myself. If I had gotten to the game last year, would I have a different kind of mindset? But mainly for me, what's incredibly complex just right now and I've been learning Pokemon again in the Dragapult era. So like
Mhm.
when I was into the start of this year, it was Regidrago, which used Phantom Dive. And so like the Phantom Dive concept and the moving damage counters concept is just so incredibly skill intensive
Mhm.
and complex, both in just, I mean, it's the math. Like, I won't lie, having a Pokemon with 320 HP and having to like consider how I'm going to do this damage over the next few turns, I do think that is like different. I know the attacks have had their power level bumped,
Mhm.
but it still feels to me that like I'm doing more complex damage calculations than I used to when Pokemon had less HP. So I think that's a part of it. And I think it's just the crazy amount of damage spread right now because it used to be, the Pokemon was just attacking, like basically in 2011 Worlds, I was able to one shot most stuff because the Typhlosion at the time put a damage counter on their Reshiram when they powered it up, so I didn't even have to have a plus power. I would just kind of trade, go one for one. So
Mhm.
it was a lot of one shotting stuff, but it was also even just that there wasn't a ton of complexities of like, okay, they're not spreading them to my bench in this way. There was a Pokemon catcher basically, but that was just, they bring it up, they hit this. If there
Mhm.
was a snipe effect, it was like do 40 damage to a bench, single bench Pokemon or whatever. But the damage counter placements in this current format is just wild to me. The Monkey Dories, the Phantom Dives, and stuff like that. Like those to me represent one of the most like skill intensive and difficult formats to learn how to play these decks that I can remember in any of my playing history. So again, maybe it'll change as I am witness to different types of card effects, within the next couple of years. But for now, just having Gardevoir and Dragapult being kind of these like prevalent decks, man, those are those are tough. Those are tough. And so I think the punishment for misplaying is also amplified then because if you have a player who's correctly placing these damage counters, and the problem is it's not something you can map out ahead of time and tell someone, oh, you always put the damage counters on this Pokemon, you always put it in this way. Like it's changing with the situation of the game. So being
Mhm.
able to adapt and respond to that situation and understand how many turns ahead you're going to have to account for this damage that you're playing around with now, that's hard for me. That's partly why I've been defaulting to decks like Goldengo because that's I'm like, oh, I'll just blow up what's in front of me, and if it works, it works.
So does that mean next season are you jumping in maybe to a little bit more? Or are you still going to go, okay, I'm going to stay on the PNW, right? The Portland, if we have it, in Vancouver, which I sure hope we have also.
Yeah, yeah. I'm gonna see. I mean, I always said like I'm not good at playing casually.
Mhm.
Like I don't enjoy it because I come out of these events and I'm kind of beating myself up. I'm like I know I could have played better. I know I could have practiced a little more. So I'm actually gonna try to compete a little bit more this year and just see where that leads me. See how difficult it feels to like chase a world's invite. The problem is, yeah, I don't still don't have I have more funds than I used to for travel, but back in the day I would chase my Worlds invite locally. Like I didn't so it was all cities, it was all regionals, it was all states. I was never like a hard traveler. I wasn't going to Texas for regionals. I wasn't, going to these other places. So I'm going to see how it feels to still kind of try to stay local as much as possible and then be smart about some other travels. Like I am planning on going to the Vegas regionals this year. I think that'll be fun. So we'll kind of see where that goes. But like I already checked my schedule and I can't go to any of the ICs until NAIC next year. So it's not like
Mhm.
I can chase points at those types of things. So I mean, I doubt I'm gonna earn a World's invite, but I have to give myself a goal. I'm kind of a goal oriented person, so I can't just go in and be like, I'm just gonna play casually and hang out with people. Like no, I need to be trying for something, and then we'll see if it feels achievable or not in the coming years as they continually adjust the structure and just see, yeah, am I able to kind of dedicate the time that I used to? I think one thing I picked up from the Ross podcast that I just went back and listened to is he was talking about how powerful it was to be able to test online against himself and things like that. And I do think that is incredibly powerful for me as well because I don't have time to go to as many like leagues, play in person with people, stuff like that. But what I do have time to is just like, an hour a day load up on my computer and play a few matches either on the ladder or against myself.
Mhm.
And the ladder has been incredibly helpful just in learning the mechanics of decks that I would just, playing test hands in person is like it's going to take you a while to figure out what the heck you're doing. But playing online, like you can instantly be like, oh, I understand how this deck works now. I'm going to play a few rounds with it. Watch some YouTube videos of people playing it. Like the information you're able to put together,
Mhm.
I think can account for my potential lack of in-person testing. But I do think in place of in-person testing, I need to make sure I'm attending these local league cups, league challenges more because I learned so much. I played through one day of cups and I've like up leveled myself immensely. So I just need to like get into the groove of going to these events more. And I think, for everyone, that's kind of the best thing you can do is just play a bit more and you'll start to like it'll snowball. You'll speak to other players, you'll speak to the good players, you'll speak to people about matchups while you're there, and you're just able to collect this information that you never would have got if you're just at home kind of like bashing your own head against the wall.
The official World Champ advice: play more Pokemon.
Yeah, play more Pokemon, but specifically play more Pokemon against good players. So you got to go to these events and you got to get to high enough tables that you're playing the good players, because then you can really pick up on some lines of play that you never would have thought about before.
David, thank you so much for joining us. This was quite informative. I really enjoyed it. If people want to find you, is there anywhere they can reach out to you? Or are you happy not being found?
No, I love being found. I wish I was a little bit better at being on Twitter, but I just never really got myself into that. So I do have a Twitter account, if that's the only place people can reach me. I think it's Alpaca Dak. My initials is DAC, and so it's just Alpaca Dak. But then otherwise, my name on Facebook, you can always shoot me a message for anyone who still knows what Facebook is. And otherwise, if you there is enough people in the community who have some kind of link to me, so you can always ask someone to get to me in some capacity, and I can get back to people. But yeah, maybe I'll just need to start getting on Twitter or something. But I don't have anything to post. I'm not really a content generator. I just use social media to keep in contact with other people. So, but yeah, always happy to have people reach out in any way that they're able to find me.
Myself, you can follow me Twitch, Twitter, YouTube, and Blue Sky at mellow_magikarp. Rate and review the show. Follow the show at Lake of Rage Pod. We'll have an episode probably not till August, but we'll have something pre-Worlds. This has been another episode of the Lake of Rage podcast. We'll catch you all in 3 or 4 weeks.